everyone, and welcome to this new episode of 10 Questions About Cloud. Today we have Isabel Huerga with us. Welcome, Isabel.
Thank you very much.
So I always use the first question to introduce yourself. So basically, who is Isabel? What are you doing?
Well, my name is Isabel Huerga, and I am a Senior Developer Advocate at AWS. I focus on the UK and Ireland region, even though I'm originally from Spain, but I'm at the moment focused on this region. And I've been at AWS about 4 years, a little bit more than 4 years now. But before joining this developer relations team, I was a technical account manager. So yeah, been doing a little bit of everything, really.
Wow, that sounds very, very cool. But now I'm curious about your cloud journey. Maybe you can tell us when was the first time you heard the word cloud or maybe AWS, and what were your first steps towards the cloud?
I'd say my cloud journey, I don't know. For me, my cloud journey probably starts when I started studying computing, because my journey is really a technology journey. So I started working with, as I was telling you before, I started working with traditional environments and architectures, and I work as a network administrator and a sysadmin, and I work a lot with virtualizations, like starting from server virtualization, and then we started doing also application virtualization, and then desktop virtualization and VDI and so on. And then the cloud became more popular, and more customers wanted to start moving their workloads to the cloud. And it was also easier to implement certain workloads. So that's why it got my curiosity, right? I always liked to see what is the newest technology. And that's why I started with virtualization at that back then. I'm showing my age here, probably. And then when the cloud started, I also had curiosity. I didn't have the opportunity to work on it because my customers weren't doing a lot with the cloud back then. But then I got the opportunity to work at AWS. And that was actually my first experience with production workloads in the cloud, in AWS, to be fair. As in like pure in the cloud. But yeah, so I guess my journey started with joining AWS, probably maybe a little bit earlier, but yeah, more or less like that.
Oh, cool. It's a very, very, very good company to start with the cloud, I will say, because they are the pioneers. They started this concept of cloud. And I'm sure that you already know how the cloud works. What are the advantages? Why would you recommend a company to move to the cloud? Or maybe in other words, what are the biggest advantages you see moving to the cloud?
So probably because I've worked for so long with traditional environments and like building data centers and putting servers in racks and cabling and configuring all these devices. And I know all the efforts and all the work it takes to build your own data center. That's why I'm so excited to tell customers about the cloud, because I know firsthand all the work that you won't have to worry anymore about, and all the delays. I remember whenever we wanted to build something, you have to purchase all the hardware, and that takes time because you put the order and then you have to wait until all the components arrive, and sometimes you're missing one NIC or you're missing one component, and that delays the whole project. And then you have to install, you have to configure, and once everything is up and running, it doesn't end there. You have to continue to maintain that, the hardware and the software. And it's not only the servers and the networking components and everything, and the electricity and everything else, it's also the space. You have to consider the cooling, the air conditioning, right? You have to consider electricity. You want to have a resilient environment. So if there is a blackout, you have your production there. So you have to consider all these scenarios. Very often you have to consider disaster recovery. That's also a very complex conversation because it needs to be at a certain distance, depending on what scenarios you want to be resilient to. So all these conversations with the cloud just simply disappear. There is no delays. There is no put an order and wait until the hardware arrives. There is no install, configure before you actually can start building your applications. All that fully disappears. So I would say probably speed. Speed it's amazing. Like it's unimaginable to try to have the same speed with a traditional environment. The other one is cost. It's not only the cost of what you're building, it's the cost of the human resources that are actually building that data center, right? That are putting all these components and configuring and maintaining all these components. Is also the cost of we mentioned the air conditioning, right? Those are all, it's much more than just the machines. You have to consider everything that you need to continue to have those machines running. And it's also, for me, one that is key and that I see the companies that move to the cloud really can embrace that is experimentation. Because traditionally, when you were like buying all these servers and installing all these components, you had a project. So you have to size the environment based on the project. So one, you have to guess, and that was very funny exercises of just trying to calculate peaks and things like that, that you don't have to do now. But also, if for whatever reason things change, the reaction time, that doesn't happen on an on-premises environment, on traditional environments. In the cloud, you try something, it's not really what we need, let's change it. You can change, you can completely reimagine those projects and continuously change them. And that elasticity, that flexibility, I think it's great for experimentations because it's what you want. You want to be able to try things with no risk, with no commitment, right? And that's why, to me, the cloud is just like it really embraces experimentation and innovation because it allows you to continue to try things and innovate and create at a maximum speed. So yeah, that's why I'm so, maybe because I come from that world, that I really fully embrace the benefits.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. To me, it happened really the opposite story. I just started creating an AWS account. It took me, 1 hour, maybe less. And in 5 minutes, I already had my EC2 instance running with my WordPress website running on there. And in less than 2 hours, I already was able to test an application, to just have a website on production. And then when I hear from my colleagues or from others that 10 years ago or maybe 15, it took 1 month, even 2 or 3 months, it depends, just to have this example. And I was like, what? No way.
Crazy.
Yeah, crazy. And and just paying one euro per month just for this EC2 instance. The cloud is just changing the world, and it's making the things really, really easy. But on the other side, in my opinion, the cloud it's now like a monster. It's huge. It's really broad. And it's also very difficult to know everything or to know, kind of each topic, because the cloud is it's not just infrastructure, it's also computing, machine learning, serverless, databases, IoT. It's huge now. Could you maybe tell us what's your focus, or what are you more interested in? Your experience.
Yeah, so I don't know if I can, it's always difficult for me to describe in one word. I'm always kind of jealous because I know some colleagues, for example, Marcia, you talk about Marcia, so she's like serverless. She has one word, she can tell you what she does, right? It's amazing. And I have other colleagues like machine learning or IoT. In my case, I focus on, I would probably say my work would be infrastructure, but it's hard to imagine that in the cloud, right? But I really try to help because I understand all the underlying components that are required to build those architectures in the cloud. I'm able to provide advice on how to properly build in the cloud. So to give you an example, you talk about migrations. Migrations is something that I personally like talking about. I know it's like, wow, migrations are boring, are complex. No, it's not. It's exciting. It's a journey, right? It's a journey for the better. So just think about the benefits. There are some challenges, but it's an exciting opportunity. And things like, for example, DNS. DNS it's super important. You might be using serverless, containers, or virtual instances. It doesn't matter. If you have an endpoint, pretty sure you're using DNS. Understanding how DNS works. It's something like a lot of people don't fully understand how it works, but understanding that can really help because you can optimize some things. For migrations, for example, is one of the things I like to talk about is if you're going to do a cutover, a DNS cutover, there are some things that you can do in advance to make it smoother, right? The SSL certificates, right? It's the same. It's like someone takes care of that, but we still use them. It's been there for a long time, but it doesn't mean we don't use them. It's just they are so ingrained in our environments that we just take them for granted. But these are all things that are still very, very important and someone needs to take care of. And I do personally believe we shouldn't forget them. I know it's very exciting to build applications, but you still need all these other, components that are key to provide those services. So I would say, yeah, infrastructures, I guess is the word. I don't know if it really reflects it, but yeah.
Yeah, but I totally agree with you. You need to have these fundamentals, all these basics in order to be able to get yourself specialized into one topic. You say, I don't know, serverless, for example. If you don't know the basics, it doesn't make any sense to try to get specialized into one very specific topic. You need to understand how the cloud works and yeah, such kind of things as you mentioned, like DNS or computing in general. Very, very important. Also networking.
Networking is, yeah. And it's one of the challenges I often see, and maybe you can give me your point of view here, because you started your cloud native, but it's one of the challenges I see when, for example, a developer starts using the cloud, all of a sudden, in a traditional environment, developers would just like develop applications. They weren't exposed to the network, only as much as they needed. But now you move to the cloud, and all of a sudden the network it's a part of the environment that you're building, right? When you're writing a CloudFormation template, or even if you're using Terraform, where you're building those environments, the network is part of that environment. And all of a sudden, you need to have that understanding. And before, it wasn't a requirement, like someone would configure the network and you weren't exposed. You don't know how it's configured. It's not the networking team problem, right? But now in the cloud, you need to understand the network. You need to have that understanding, and you need to understand subnetting, and you need to understand how all these components communicate, and private and public networks, and where the traffic is going. And I saw it sometimes where, for example, if you use a public endpoint, understanding that then the traffic is going to have a much longer route and the impact that can have on performance and everything else, rather than, for example, using a private endpoint. Of course, both work, but there is a massive difference, right, on using one or the other. And now that's what I'm saying. All of a sudden, you need to have that understanding of networking. You need to have a much broader view of all the different layers of your architecture. It's not just like, I develop applications, I write code, that's it.
Yeah, definitely. So I believe that having cloud knowledge or cloud skills if not already, it's going to be a standard. I mean, it's going to be a standard skill that anyone in the IT industry will need to have, because the cloud has come to stay. And knowing the basics, the fundamentals is going to be always a requirement in order to get any job, because there is no other solution out there. I mean, you can go on premise, yes, but I'm sure even if you go full on premise, you are going to stay in touch with other companies or with other, let's say, providers that will need to use the cloud. So at the end, that's what I believe. Do you think also the same?
Yeah, no, totally agree. I think it's important to have those skills, even if you don't need them right now, it's very likely that they might be useful in the future. So definitely.
We are talking about on-premise or cloud, where we are, of course, more focused on the cloud, but there are even strategies to combine both of them. Like you can go with an hybrid cloud strategy and then go full cloud, or, that's middle steps, or maybe because of different reasons, you want to have some stuff on premise and other stuff on the cloud. What's your experience there? Or maybe you can tell us what's your opinion about those strategies?
Yeah, I do agree that different customers are at different stages, and it would be unrealistic to say, just move everything to the cloud as if it was a simple task, right? Especially because some customers have still maybe legacy workloads and it's not straightforward to move to the cloud, or maybe it doesn't make sense because they were designed for a different type of environment. And that's why when I talk about migrations, I use in AWS, we have these like R's. We use the 7 R's, which are like refactor or replatform or and so on, because it reflects that. It reflects that it's not only every customer, but even inside that customer, different workloads might be in different stages. So some workloads are legacy. It doesn't make sense to move them to the cloud. So you can leave them there until maybe you're gonna replace them with something that is cloud native. Others, you decide to move to something, for example, containers, or you want to refactor that application. You decide to either change it the way it's architected or rebuild it completely. If it makes sense again. Others, you were talking before about VMware, right? A lot of customers still use VMware, and they have VMware in their on-premises environments. And that's why we now provide VMware on AWS, because it makes it way easier for these customers to just move using the same tools that they are familiar with. Because this is also very important, right? It's not only the fact that you're going to move your workloads and they are going to be moved from on-premises to the cloud, it's also what are the skills that you have available in the teams. Because it's not just we're going to move to the cloud. Is your team ready to operate those workloads in the cloud? You're going to ask them to use new tools, new processes. We talk also about the culture that you need to be in the cloud, potentially, ideally, a DevOps culture and not just segmented, isolated teams, right? And you want to embrace automation. You want to embrace infrastructure as code. You want to embrace all those good practices if you start looking at the cloud. So it's not just move to the cloud. Move to the cloud, potentially, it usually goes related to a change in the culture of the organization. And that's why I think it's a broader conversation, and you should consider things like, for example, what are the skills available in the team? If they are familiar with VMware, maybe just moving to VMware on AWS is a great first step. You can start benefiting from some of the benefits of the cloud, but still using the tools that you're familiar with and make it like a smooth transition. So that's why, I agree, like it's not a straightforward. And I do agree, like every customer will have its own scenario. And that's why sometimes hybrid environment makes sense. Sometimes it's just a temporary, sometimes it's a longer period if it's a longer migration. Sometimes it's maybe more straightforward. And then we have other companies like yourself that are cloud native that decide we will start building directly in the cloud and everything will be cloud native, and that's great. But not everybody is there. So that's why it's important to have different scenarios that are available for the different needs.
Yeah. So we do agree that the cloud is changing organizations, is changing also the way to work. This is a very important point. And it's kind of changing the industry, but not also the IT industry, kind of the world, because in the cloud, it kind of doesn't matter which industry you are working at, you will probably use the cloud. So at the end of the day, cloud is already becoming a kind of a standard or a need in any kind of job. But the question which I want to do for you is more focused on AWS, because I read an article that the AWS released kind of, I don't know, more than 300 or 400 releases last year. I don't know, something very, very crazy. I also follow quite, let's say, a lot the AWS blog, and it's also crazy how many new services, releases, updates, changes. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. How do you do that? I mean, how you're working at AWS, but how are you doing that?
It's impossible to know. I agree. It's a lot of information. It's very difficult to know everything about everything. I have a few sources though. The one that I use, for example, most often, I have an RSS. I use the RSS feed, so I just get like the headers, and then I drill down whenever it's something super relevant or super interesting. And I have it for the what's new. I think that's a great source to know what's happening, and that allows me to know, be aware, at least have that awareness of everything that is being announced. The blogs that you mentioned, that is a great source. There are a lot of blogs, and again, there is a lot of information. But again, if you either use an RSS feed or something like that, or if you can also choose the blogs based on the topics that you are more interested in. Jeff Barr, usually, I personally like his style, and he usually tends to write about things that I find particularly interesting too. But otherwise, yeah, you can also filter by topic or domain. So I would say it's impossible to read everything about everything. My personal approach is just read the headers for awareness, just to know what's happening, have that broader view, and then read the full articles for the topics that I'm interested in. I wouldn't, and also because some of the topics are completely out of my domain, and I'm not, I wouldn't fully absorb. I would need to learn a lot before I could understand everything that is happening on that space.
Yeah, that happened to me a lot. I start with a blog, and I suddenly see kind of a concept or a strategy which I have no idea. Then I click on that new blog. Then I start reading a new blog. In that new blog, I see again a new topic which sounds interesting for me. And at the end, it's kind of, what? I spent here 3 hours and I'm just reading blogs.
Where did this started?
Yeah. No, but on the other hand, I think it's very, very important to have a lot of information out there. There are a lot of use cases. There are a lot of industries and companies and organizations that need support and help. And I think blogs are a very good way to, just to explain concepts in a very an easy read.
And it depends on how do you learn. Like different people have different approaches to learning. And for example, I need to like do things to otherwise they don't. If I just read about it, it just partially stays in my head, but I don't to be able to reapply that knowledge in other spaces, I need to touch it and break it often and troubleshoot it. And then it's when I fully understand how things work. And that's why I personally love to do labs and things like that. And we have some available. We have a lot of workshops available. Podcasts are great. Like, if, for example, I tend to listen to podcasts and things like that when I go running. And I know a lot of people love to do that. Maybe before when we used to commute and things like that. And when you're in the train, it's great to have something to listen to. So that's another great source of information, right? Like, this podcast could be your next official source of information. And I think that is great. It's just finding what works for you. Reading doesn't work for everyone, and that's fine. Maybe podcasts do, maybe labs do. Just find whatever works for you. I guess that would be my advice.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. And now I'm really curious. Could you maybe share with us one of the latest things that you learned?
One of the latest. Well, I was saying, I was doing a podcast this morning, and we were talking to Emilio Nestal, who is a solution architect manager, and he was explaining the process to join AWS. And ironically, I learned, because I joined like more than 4 years ago. I learned a lot about the process that apparently has changed a little bit. But I probably assume that you are talking about technology and not and not about the last thing you learned. In terms of technology, the last thing I learned, probably the last thing I've been playing with, as I said, I learned to say learn is when I've been like touching things, is Lambda at Edge.
Okay.
I'm not a developer. But it was great because it allowed me to create functions at Edge to manipulate the traffic, which is see, this is the thing that we were talking about, the cloud. Now, I used to be I have a very deep understanding of networking, but I'm not a developer. But now I'm able to, using functions, manipulate the network traffic, which is like, isn't that great? Now there is no strict definition of I'm a developer or I'm a network engineer. It's like, well, you cannot say you're a sysadmin anymore, because you now, with infrastructure as code, you're writing code. So in a way, are you a sysadmin/developer? So yeah, all the definitions of the jobs. But yeah, Lambda at Edge, it's great. It allows you to create functions at the edge, and you can do pretty much anything. Like, I was using it to set up cookies and to change the headers based on the responses of the server. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I used it once, but a few years ago, when it was only available at one region. I don't remember which.
It's quite recent. Yeah.
I don't know if this changed or not.
Now it's available. Well, that is a good point. So the functions, you need to have them in North Virginia. You still need to have them there, the functions themselves. But obviously, because then they run at the edge. So the edge, it's related to CloudFront. So at the end, it's on all the edge locations. But the functions themselves, you're right. You need to create them. When you go to the Lambda console, you need to have the North Virginia region. That's a good call. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I remember that. But that was, I don't know, a few years ago already.
Yeah, no. Yeah, the functions need to live there, though. Yeah.
Okay. So let's change a little bit the topic. I see that you are very active on social networks, and you are sharing a lot of knowledge with the community. You mentioned, for example, the AWS Podcast in Spanish that you are participating in. Yeah, maybe could you share with us your experience? When did you start it? Yeah.
So I didn't start. Well, I don't know. I didn't start being active in social media very, very long ago, I guess. I prefer to do, and this is weird because things have changed a lot in the last year, right? So I used to love meeting people, and, I used to love going to events and just like meeting new people and, having these random casual conversations. And I guess because the world has changed, now started to be more present in social media. So that has been something interesting for me, because the way I used to interact has completely disappeared. I hope it goes back, because I really like to have those like face-to-face conversation and the coffee, and it's just that casual meeting people, even when you go to events that, how do they call it, the hallway track, I think it's called. When everybody, it's just like the conversations that you have between a session and another session. And I think that's very important also. It's not, when you go to these events, it's not just like going to that session, and that is great, you get a lot of knowledge, but it's also exchanging information. I love whenever I do a session, I love when people come to ask you questions or to tell you, oh, I'm building it this way, or I'm using this, but I'm using it in this other way. That to me is super enriching, because it's by exchanging these different scenarios and different approaches, and maybe we're using the same tools, but we use them in different ways. And I think that is great, because I might have my idea on how things are built, or maybe of how things should be working, but then someone comes and tells you, I'm doing it this other way. And those are great conversations. And I find it's still difficult to have that virtually. So I'm more present, I'm trying to share knowledge, but I do miss the responses that those, the what comes after the session, those conversations that come afterwards. I do miss that.
Yeah, hopefully soon. I also miss those events and conversations, but we have to survive.
It is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And the last question, it's more a personal question, I will say, because, well, you already know there are a lot of roles in the cloud world. I know there is more, let's say, developer or data or architect, but you are a developer advocate. Could you maybe explain what does it mean? How does a day-to-day look like?
It's funny, because the first time I heard about the role, I thought, well, I'm not a developer. That was my first reaction. Like, I'm not a developer. Like, is this only for developers? And it's not. It's the way we understand developer at AWS is a builder, really. So maybe I should call myself builder advocate. Doesn't really sound very, I don't know. But yeah, because that's the thing, is what we were saying before, with infrastructure as code, everyone is a developer in a way, right? Even if you're focused on security, you're still in a way writing code and working with code. And because that's the thing, the cloud is not, it's all code at the end. You don't have a server to put in a rack anymore. So that's why the developer is not just pure application developers, not the traditional definition, it's builders. And what do? I basically, I engage with the community. And my goal is to try to remove the noise. As you say, there is a lot of information. And my goal is to try to clarify, remove all the noise, so it's easier to find the information that you need, and hopefully when you need it. And to do that, yes, we do public speaking, and we try to write content that is helpful. So we try to not do like sales pitches. We don't do that. We just like focus on doing demos and showing how the services can be used, or how to, if you, for example, have a specific scenario, how you can, using our services, how you can tackle that. And we also engage a lot with communities. So I'm usually often in contact with the user groups and members of the community, like the heroes, the new community builders that we have now. Because again, it's the community that usually helps also grow each other, right? It's by sharing information, by sharing knowledge, by sharing ideas, that we can all help each other and grow together. And I think that the community is a key component. It's a key part of that. And that's why I love engaging with them as much as I can, especially these days. But yeah, my day-to-day is a little bit of everything, from a lot of creating content. As you can imagine, public speaking is part of it. I try to do more hands-on if you look at the things I do, I normally do like game days. Next week, I'm going to be at a deep racer that we are doing also for the community. So as I said, I love the hands-on. I really love more doing than telling. And that's why usually I do either workshops or things like that, or my sessions try to have always demos and things like that.
Oh, really, really interesting. I'm sure you don't get bored.
No, not often.
No, that's pretty cool. I also think that the community, it's very, very important, and you can learn a lot from the community and with the community. And yeah, I think you are doing very great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and yeah, the podcast is already finished. I mean, that was already the 10 questions about the cloud. I would like to thank Isabel for being part of it, and yeah, for taking your time, your busy time. And yeah, it's been a pleasure for me having you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. And it was really good conversation.
I will leave all your social networks in the description in case anyone wants to contact you or wants to know more details about your role. Who knows?
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you very much again, and see you in the next podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.